Good evening. I'm Christy Max Williams, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the culminating program of this, the 25th year of the Arts Café Mystic. Thank you. For those of you somehow new to the Arts Café, our mission is to present the nation's most celebrated poets and writers, along with New England's best musicians, in programs that lift your spirits as they deepen your minds. And if we have a little fun along the way, I promise you full recovery. This is indeed the Arts Café's 25th birthday. And of course, such anniversaries are conducive of reflection. So here is an origin story. In 1993, I had just arrived in Mystic, having decamped from New York. At the time, there was frankly not much to do in Mystic. It's true. So I became involved with a group of young poets who would meet to read and talk about poetry. Sometimes we made music too. Melanie Greenhouse was among them. At the time, I must confess that I detested contemporary poetry. It's true. Which seemed to me self-consciously difficult, obscure, and precious. But one night I found myself at a formal poetry reading in a library a couple of towns down the road. The poet that evening was named Marilyn Nelson, who I'd never heard of. And I was struck, as though, by lightning, by the directness and clarity of what she read, by the intelligence, common sense, and deep heart of her poems. As a result, I checked out some other serious poetry readings and discovered that poetry had undergone a material change. And so, with Melanie and a couple of other friends, we conceived the Arts Café as a coffee house setting that would present poetry and music. Thanks to Tony Halsey, who was president of the then Mystic Arts Center, we found a warm, welcoming home for our series. And here we are, 25 years later, checkered tablecloths and all. When, a quarter century ago, we thought about hiring a famous poet to launch the Arts Café, we went right after Marilyn Nelson, who graciously consented to read for the paltry sum we could afford to pay her. That evening from our own pockets, as I recall, Melanie. What a way to kick off a series, though. So it was that in planning for tonight's anniversary edition of the Arts Café, we went right after Ms. Nelson again. And what a perfect moment to present her. Because this week, the Poetry Foundation awarded her its highest honor, the Ruth Lilly Prize, given to a living U.S. poet, thank goodness, given to a living U.S. poet for a lifetime's work, one of the great honors our nation bestows on a poet, including the slight remuneration of a $100,000 prize check. So I know you'll all want to hit on Marilyn tonight. We will, of course, hear Ms. Nelson read later in the show, but first we have other fish to fry. Our opening voice tonight is the poet Sean Frederick Forbes, who's the author of an extraordinary debut poetry collection called Providencia. If you can point to Isla Providencia on a map, you definitely win the geography laurels tonight. For the rest of us, Providencia is a small island, part of Colombia, but situated in the Caribbean, roughly between Costa Rica and Jamaica. This is good. Founded as a Puritan colony not long after Plymouth Rock, Providencia would become headquarters to Henry Morgan and other famous pirates. Today it's part of a UNESCO marine reserve and a prime tourist destination. It's also where Sean Frederick Forbes's people are from. Though the poet was born in Europe during his father's military posting there, and though he grew up in the Bronx, for Mr. Forbes, Providencia is part spiritual home, part idée fixe, as to the answer of who in the world he is. As you will see, the poems in Providencia are in some cases myth-making, in others imaginative quests to find the author's genesis, and in still others dispatches from the often gritty reality of contemporary life. My friends, the Arts Café reads lots of debut books of poems, but Providencia is special. We invite you to see for yourself as you join us in welcoming Sean Frederick Forbes.
Good evening. How's everyone doing? Great. I never get nervous until this incredible introduction, and now I'm just sweating. Christy, thank you for that. That was amazing. How's the volume there? Good? One little caveat. Marilyn Nelson was my graduate professor in 2009 at the University of Connecticut, and she had asked a question at the beginning of class, and she said, well, what type of poet are you? And I said, I'm a narrative poet. So, and she herself is a narrative poet as well. I wanted to get brownie points. I'm going to read a poem titled Gnosis, which is the Greek word for knowledge. After burning my right arm from a skillet with scalding canola oil, I fainted. I was 4. Perhaps the pain was extreme, or the stench of my delicate flesh quickly cooking did it. I was losing my sense of touch. My arm is a geography of scars. I can point out South and Central America from my index finger to the base of my thumb. The skin becomes darker on my forearm, like an ocean or the spotted river Styx, where my hairs are the rooted dead. My elbow is a rust color, cracked dry like the Sahara. I cut it once. The blood poured out like sweet water. My fingers went numb as my grandmother patched me up. I was 10, and for therapy, she advised writing to renew my skin. For years, I wrote without pen or paper, remembering stories, reciting phrases until I was 18. Then I began to tear away all I knew, ideas, images, facts as delicate as corn silk. My arm warmed, my fingers swollen and red, but the pen now steady in my hold. Thank you. My grandmother, my mother's mother, was one of the most important figures in my life. When my parents divorced, I was 5 years old, and they were both unable to take care of me. And so my grandmother was 61 years old. She had raised 8 children, and she said, I will raise him. 61 years old. She passed away on April 20th. She was 94 years old. And I'm dedicating every bit of this reading to her because she was the one who taught me the cadence of poetry, but she wasn't a poet. She understood narratives were important to tell. If it weren't for her raising me, I would not have this book right now. My grandmother was a character. She loved to walk around with her pocketbook, and she had 3 special items in her pocketbook: a $50 tube of Givenchy lipstick, her rosary beads, and a switchblade. She had all the bases covered, and you never touched her top pocketbook. It's exactly the full thing. She's ready to meet someone for a date. She's ready to meet God. She's ready for a fight. That was my grandmother. So Christy told you about the island of Providencia, Colombia. My grandmother and many of the inhabitants speak an English-based patois, very similar to the patois that you would hear in Jamaica, but they also spoke Spanish. And my grandmother had a very interesting errand to run in 1949. This is a poem about the errand that she had to run. It was to tell my grandfather that she was pregnant with my mother. Errand 1949, Eileen in Providencia. The main road is a dirt road. From Lazy Hill to town, it's more than an hour on foot, but she refuses to ride side saddle on her brother's horse. She's wearing open-toed high heels, her thick black hairs twisted into a fat chignon. Her silky floral dress clings to her stomach. The women notice the slight bulge, anticipating the disfigurement of motherhood for her, while their husbands crave the perspiration gathering in her cleavage. She walks into the bank, her dusty suede heels sparking hard against the tiled floor, sweet and sirenic. She spends 15 minutes writing a telegram to her husband in Curaçao. She pictures him kissing his mistress and shoves the form to the clerk. He reads the line, "That barren woman will lose her scent. Stop, come back." She sees the clerk write this down on a separate piece of paper, knowing he will give it to his wife later. She pays the fee, refuses to thank him, and slowly leaves the bank, cautious as a freed slave. My grandmother was a dish. When I went to Providencia, all of the men in her age group said, "My God, what a woman your grandmother was." And I didn't know how to take that, and they said, "You are going to take it in the way we are telling you to take it." And I just left it at that. It was just easier. The other thing about Providencia that you should know, it has an entire landmass of 5 miles. 5 miles. Everyone is related. My grandmothers were first cousins. My grandfathers were second cousins. That just tells you everything. Island Gazelle. And my grandmother was a midwife, so this will make sense to you. As a midwife, my grandmother was once paid in honey. Against impotence, she fixed elixirs with the secret fire in honey. Her younger brother had studied the myths. According to lore, he said, before his hunts, Cupid doctored his arrows in honey. Growing tired of her trade, she took on an ancient calling, named herself matchmaker, envisioned unions glued in honey. Her clients swallowed a teaspoon of nectar, a supplication to love. Would she be called a bruja if she awoke the mystical powers in honey? She dreamt of a spirit playing guitar with brown quills for fingers and knew she'd have a grandson who'd write verses phrased in honey. Named Eileen after the Celts' underworld demon, she listened to my musings about Hades. The gods ordered boats painted in honey. As a child, she told me my skin was smooth, rich amber. She laughed as I drenched my winter pale skin in honey. My grandmother had wonderful rituals. She used to like to burn onion skins, so the paper skin, because she felt that would rid gossip. I was never going to tell her no. It's not going to do that. But it kind of worked. This is titled The Burning. My grandmother burns onion skin to end gossip. A gay grandson, a cheating husband, a depressed daughter. She drinks a cup of fever grass tea, takes the onion in her right hand, tearing off the skin. She tells me the crinkles she hears are rumors. The onion skin is no longer. Placing it on the burner, she lights the stove on high. The rumple of words die into weak ash. The precious smell of her private vengeance perfumes the kitchen for days. And it really did. Isla Providencia. From his final trip to Providencia, I asked my grandfather to bring back a piece of the island, so he wrapped a conch shell with 3 towels deep in his suitcase, among plastic jars jammed with stewed plums and orange rinds. A gift of hidden sources. Make of it what you wish, he says, placing the common Caribbean souvenir in my lap, leaving me to imagine Henry Morgan discovering this shell, cupping it over his right ear, swaying to the siren's cunning whistles, declaring Providencia his final resting place. My grandfather tells me that a Lazy Hills woman's dying wish was for a conch shell to be laid on her grave since she loved the mollusk's tough muscle. I pretend I am a Carib warrior, inserting my fingers into the shell's curved aperture, like Poseidon wielding this weapon above my head against British and Spanish. How easy the turn to violence. The shell's beige, pink, and ivory, no longer protective covering, but the blood and bone of pirates, Indians, slaves. I'm going to flip through here to the back. Has anyone been on Ancestry.com? It's a tricky little search engine. And so I received a Woodrow Wilson fellowship to travel to Providencia in 2009 for 3 months. It was probably 3 months too long. There was really nothing to do after a while, and suddenly there was so much gossip, and sort of the narratives I was hearing were starting to contradict themselves. People were just amused by the fact that I was just writing down everything they were saying, and so they would just make up things, and I thought, no, what happened to that first story on the first day when you weren't drunk, you know? So then I tried Ancestry.com, and it really didn't give me much, but it showed me something else. The other thing to know, the inhabitants of Providencia have British or Anglo-Irish surnames, Forbes. My mother's maiden name is Robinson. My grandmother's maiden name was Newball. You would find names like McLaughlin, Ranklin. I'm trying to think of a few others, Benson, Johnson. Those are the types of names you would hear. But then you would also hear a lot of first names like Umberto or Ofemia. So it's quite interesting, the mixture that's happening here. Ancestry. I write down their names in pencil. Uriah, Thomas, John, Umberto. Names of Newball men. Ofemia, Mercedes, Ana Teresa, Mary. Names of Robinson women. Distant cousins remind me that the whole island is related. Robinsons, Newballs, even the Forbes can trace their lineages to a single Polish man, revolutionary turned pirate who abandoned the warship Mosquito, settled on the island, and married 2 sisters, fathering children with each. I listened to every version offered about intermarriages, illegitimate children, family maladies passed down, vertigo, deafness, male pattern baldness. One cousin tells me that some even tried to pass for white. She laughs heartily and says, "Imagine passing for white when the sun always look for you." Ancestry.com can find my grandfather's and brother's death certificates, my parents' marriage license, my father's Vietnam draft orders, but 1967 is as far as the search engine goes. I walk to the section of Lazy Hill, owned for 200 years by my grandfather's family, to find stray dogs rummaging through a garbage dump. This is my encounter with three very handsome German men who were on Providencia in their wonderful Speedos. It's simply titled Desire. I want to tear away the dead skin from their freckled backs, ball it up, then rub it over my body, but settle for watching these two young men splash water in each other's faces, pale, tall, and German, back from deep-sea diving, sporting black and blue Speedos, waving me over to invite me into their game of tackle, the tweaking of nipples, the pinching of the sides of torsos, high-pitched laughter. This type of play is expected of tourists, but I refuse since island gossip would haunt me, the blasphemous American living out careless desires, his body aching like stab wounds to join them. And really, I could not engage in that type of banter. I'll read two more. My grandfather, from 1945 all the way until his death in 2004, had a mistress. My grandmother was well aware of this. She was okay with it. They were the original polyamorous couple, when I think about it. Their marriage just never made sense to me until I had this nightmare dream about meeting my grandfather's mistress. I had always heard about her. She was a prominent figure in my life, even though I never met her, because the stories about her were so fascinating. Get ready for some riddles, because this has some riddles in it that you might hear throughout parts of the Caribbean. And the poem is titled Truce. Here's the first riddle. My father has a house. It stands on one post. Okay. I imagine my grandfather's lover saying this in her backyard kitchen as she serves me rundown, a rich fish stew made by boiling coconut oil, green plantains, and yucca. She offers me a tall glass of tamarind water, looks directly into my eyes, tells me how much I resemble him, just a few shades darker. She's still beautiful at 90, something she attributes to being barren. I note her gray eyes mottled with cataracts, liver spots speckling her hands. The faded house dress cinched at her waist smells of lime. She offers me another riddle. My mother has a thing. Every time it walks, it drops a stitch. My stomach turns sour. I stop eating. Bitter saliva pools in the back of my mouth, but I manage to ask her, do you still mourn him? She replies, third riddle, a ship goes to Jamaica. All the men have red caps. I finish my drink. She twists her mouth, sucks her teeth, and tells me she mourns the lilt of his voice when at night he used to tell her the only island riddles he knew. She lights a cigarette, pours me another glass, and speaks slowly in a deep voice. Fourth riddle. Roomful, hallful, can't get a spoonful. Fifth riddle. Black as jet, white as snow, green as grass. She dares me to tell her the answer to the last riddle, and I offer the answer up like gems on a plate. Umbrella, sewing machine, matchbook, smoke, soursop. She belts out a phlegmatic laugh, tells me I need more than Robinson smarts and looks to be an islander. We were quite salty to each other in that nightmare. This is my final poem titled Excursion. From Southwest Bay to Lazy Hill, I take the main paved road. People sitting on their porches during siesta wave at me and shake their heads. I'm wearing a white tank top, khaki shorts, sneakers. I have a digital camera in hand. I have chosen to walk at noon. I stop to take a rest at Nan Hill and begin to scroll through pictures I've taken of pastel dinghies on shore, school children in white and blue uniforms eating frunas. Sorry, frunas is a little like sour candy. Outside a little shop, a rotting mango swarming with flies on the side of the road. Camera in my back pocket. I walk down the steep hill. Teenagers, sometimes 4 on a motorbike, zip past me, exhaust stinging my nose. When I see the rust-red zinc roof, the only one in town that isn't corroded, I know it's the house. Past the closed front door, I walk to the side, begin to pick the remaining Seville plums from the tree planted the day of my mother's birth. The cistern filled with rainwater and floating mosquitoes bears my grandfather's initials. Behind it, my grandmother and her sister used to wear high heels and white orchids in their hair and slaughtered cows to supplement their husbands' incomes. I leave the house, walk around the entire island, think it best not to take any more pictures. I struggle to write my first impressions when I get back to my hotel room. Thank you.
Sean Frederick Forbes, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Sean. And yes, we do have Sean's debut book, Providencia, on sale tonight. A wonderful book. As always, all proceeds go to the author. This gives me a chance to thank our friends at Bank Square Books for partnering with us. Isn't Mystic lucky to have such a hip and friendly independent bookstore? Yes, I think they deserve a round of applause too. We also want to thank the Mystic Museum of Art for welcoming us for these 25 years. Our community is fortunate to have such a resource, and we're grateful to be at home here. So, on with our show. The Arts Café has presented just about every kind of music you can think of. Rock, folk, jazz, classical, opera. Our musical interlude tonight is provided in part by Nora Fox, who, as many of you know from her past performances at the Arts Café, embodies all of these musical genres. Nora comes to us from New York City, but many of you know her as a local girl from Stonington, who has made good while performing on Broadway, at the Goodspeed Opera, Madison Square Garden, the Eugene O'Neill Center, and on tour in South America, the Mediterranean, and Mali. Nora is joined tonight by the accomplished classical cellist Zhu Young Lee. JY is a product of Juilliard and Vanderbilt. He's plying an international career as a soloist, chamber musician, and recording artist. He recently toured the US with Warp Trio and the Core Ensemble, two genre-stretching chamber groups he co-founded. Though he's performed with the Nashville Symphony and New York Symphonia Ensemble, among many others, he's also recorded on jazz, rock, and country albums. I've no idea what sort of genre-confounding musical alchemy they have in store for us tonight, but it should be interesting. So won't you please join me in welcoming Nora Fox and J.Y. Lee.
Singing when there's no one out there. What's the point in working when your plans get you nowhere? I don't want to go home. No, I don't want to wake up. Are my dreams getting closer? Or am I just growing older? What's the point in asking when you already know the answer? Where's the glory in working? Come on, don't you just stand there. I don't want to go home. No, I don't want to wake up. Are my dreams getting closer? Or am I just growing older? Dear friend J.Y. Lee on the cello. Hi. All right, we got some tunes for you, some new, some fresh, some old, some creaky, and little Debussy in there, spice things up towards the end. So Feel free to chime in if you want. If you have instruments or voices, you're always welcome to sing with us. And hi, Mom. Different side this time. Sneaky. Anyway. All right, let's do faster. When I saw you, I stepped back. You walked over across the pavement. I knew what you were saying, though your words made no difference. Falling over through the waiting faster. Release it to the birds who spun out in the forest. The quiet in the night, our voices wouldn't reach the chorus. Bring me back this rope on sleigh, these dragons, darling. Walking threadbare through the moss, take good care of your heart. Find yourself somebody new. Just be sure she's good to you. When I saw you as the back, you walked over across the pavement. I knew what you were saying, though your words made no difference. Falling over through the waiting faster. Release it to the birds you spun out in the forest. The quiet in the night, our voices wouldn't reach the chorus. Bring me back this rope on sleigh, these dragons, darling. Thank you. All right, this is Sky. Hold you when we dream, round and round we weave, easy if you try. Your legs wrap gently, your lips brush closer, we last till morning sky. She laughs gently, there's a place called heaven. The sky aches blue now as her mind unbends. See the twilight as the rays touch gold. There's a useless fear that the sun won't Dawn's awaiting, there's no more place. When you feel the time is now, your fingers lapse as days collapse. You long to shape your vows. Time uncertain, there's an inward beauty, one the law's unburdened. The future's purely rolling empty as the sky goes blank. I see you smiling at the lake. Let's dance now. Da, 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 brain slides even farther. The clock strikes 0 as the walls melt inward. The ceiling falls as the scars crash down. I see you smiling as the sky unfolds. The plaster crumbles to the ground. I fall in Thank you. Oh, should I turn this up a little bit, or is it fine? It sounds good, right? Great. JY and I just had some oysters at the oyster bar across the rock over there. And he told me I kept saying, "Oh, thank you, JY," excessively. I kept thanking him for everything, and I wasn't really aware I was doing it. So I told him if I do it anymore, he can just whack me. Because it's, manners these days are a thing of the past, right? No. So this next song I wrote for my father, it's about the process of letting somebody transition into another life. So it's called These Days. Something new is happening. I can see you entering. No, I won't stop or wait again. Just let them take you in. There I was, an orphan in your name. Now I see it's all in my fate. The images grow in my eyes. Fill me, I'll sacrifice. These days I won't wait for no one but you. And when you leave, carry me, I'll be with you. I'm losing my armor, I won't slow. He's moving me forward more than I know. Your eyes are holding me, melting all that stone in me. These days I won't wait for no one but you. And when you leave, carry me, I'll be with you. Moving slowly, don't let go. You don't have to wait no more. If you let them take you in, there is no end, we only begin. Now I hold almost over, nothing will harm you. I'll be your friend, I'll care for you. Just breathe and let it move. These days I won't wait for no one but you. And when you leave, carry me, I'll be with you. These days I won't wait for no one but you. And when you leave, carry me, I'll be with you. Thank you. All right, so this is sort of a newer song. Well, I guess I wrote it a couple summers ago after there was. I remember going over to a friend's house in Brooklyn, and there had just been a lot of police shootings in New York, and then there were a couple of cops that had just been shot sitting in their car, and I was talking to my friend about how there's a cycle of violence, and we keep shooting, and they keep shooting, and it's like, at what point does it do we rise above it? So I don't know that this song offers any clarity on that, but it's in dialogue with what's going on beyond New York too. But, all right, let's see. Can't break us now, we're coming soon. Baptize your sins and put your guns down. I hit the ground, you're bleeding too. Don't give up your dreams or what will save you. Please don't cry, you've gotta fight. Someday we'll die and this will be our one life. Don't touch me now, or I may break. If words don't catalyze this revolution, may they shoot you when we shoot the man, they shoot, that's why you want it. Shoot you when we shoot the man, they shoot, that's why you want it. They shoot you when we shoot the man, they shoot, that's why you want it. They shoot you when we shoot the man, they shoot, that's why you want it. Son of my pain and glory gave. Please don't let the water sink, you must save a part of you that no one sees. Strengthen your walls, but don't forget to carry me. The light of Job to grace that throne. Cut through our skin, hollow you will never know. I'm sinking now. Tether my soul, I drink the blood of holy vow. Walk into your new self. Shoot you when we shoot the man, they shoot, that's why I want it. Shoot you when we shoot the man, they shoot, that's why I want it. lift it up a little bit and give you some Debussy, because you know we have to have a token classical piece in every show. That's what we do here. So, I don't mean to be reductionist. Now, oh, hello, Josh. All right, so this is an art song, a beautiful art song, Bonsoir. And I'll just, for those of you who don't speak French, I'll just, would you like to read the translation, Christine?
When rivers are pink in the setting sun, and a slight shiver runs through the fields of wheat, a suggestion to be happy seems to rise up from all things and ascends toward the troubled heart. A suggestion to taste the charms of the world while one is young and the evening is fair, for we are on our way just as this wave is. It is going to the sea, and we to the grave.
Yeah, Christine! Thank you so much. And I have to say, to Melanie Greenhouse, where is Melanie? Where did you go? Oh, hi. Hi. Melanie, like a month ago? Just yesterday sent me this YouTube link with this song as a lullaby with voice and cello among some other arranged instruments. And she was, oh, you should do this. And I hadn't done it, the song, that is, since I was an undergrad at school in a pit of sand underneath, like, a crazy person with twigs as wings with one of my professors. So I was happy to get to do it again with JY for Melanie. So now we have one more special
Yes. Yeah, we did it. Oh, okay. We have one more. Now, one of my best friends came down. How are we for time? Where's Christy? You have time for one more? Is that all right? This is Josh Morrison, one of my closest friends that I met sophomore year of college, junior year, and we were taking a class together, and Josh had some cereal, and I just stole it from him and ate it all, and then we became friends. But I said thank you anyway. Now Josh was meant to come down. Josh has a brand new baby, so. The baby had to take a poop right before he got on the train, so he missed the train with Josh's wife. True story. So we're very sorry that the baby can't be here, but this is a lullaby that we thought would be appropriate. Unfortunately, there are no other babies in the house, so we can't sing it to them. But it's a song by the Dixie Chicks, lullaby. So, my ukulele. And I have to just tell you there's a canon in it. So when I sang, how long do you want to be loved? You're going to have to sing that as well. Is forever enough? Is forever enough? Babies for the song. It's for everybody. Is forever enough? 'Cause I'm never, never giving you up. And then there'll be a canon of that, so that's all you need to know. Alright. They didn't have you where I come from. Never knew the best was yet to come. Began when I saw your face, and I hear your laugh like a serenade. Get ready. How long do you wanna be loved? Very good. You can pipe out a little more. Is forever enough? Is forever enough? Slip in bed when you're asleep, to hold you close and feel your breath on me. Tomorrow there'll be so much to do, so tonight I'll drift in a dream with you. Of all things beautiful, you can close your eyes when you're miles away and hear my voice like a serenade. one more. How long do you wanna be loved? Is forever enough? 'Cause I'm never, never giving you up. Is forever enough? 'Cause I'm never, never giving you up. Thank you guys so much.
Nora Fox and Ju Young Lee, ladies and gentlemen.
Now, if you haven't already done so, would you please fill your glass? Because we need your help. This is from the desk of shameless self-congratulations. We would like to drink a toast to the people who have made the difference in helping the Arts Café to thrive for these 25 years. So I will need your help to do so. First, for their selfless gifts of time, talent, and philanthropy, won't you please raise your glass to the board? The board! Who is my boss? Next, for their dedicated hard work and good cheer, please lift your glasses to our volunteers who are virtually all around you. Okay, lastly, I would invite you to please stand up. All of you stand up. All right. And lift your glasses for the open-minded curiosity, warmth, and humor they bring to the Arts Café. Won't you please toast to our audience? Okay, sit down. Just one more thing. There's been a rumor circulating about the future of the Arts Café Mystic, and about me in particular. I would like to dispel this rumor by confirming that tonight is my swan song as artistic director. In stepping down, I'm glad for the chance to say thanks. Oh, I'm proud of the many great poets we've had the privilege of presenting to you. Just to boast a little, they include 10 winners of the Pulitzer Prize, 8 winners of the National Book Award, 9 of the National Book Critics Circle Award, 5 MacArthur Genius Award winners, and 5 Poets Laureate of the United States. And I'm equally proud of the many glorious musicians we've presented. But the truth is that I'm proudest of the Arts Café's audience, of your collective sophistication, humor, and open-hearted willingness to hear the new and often the strange. Poets and musicians alike love to perform at the Arts Café because they love our audience. It occurs to me that I have shared warm words or hugs with just about everyone in this room. It seems we're old friends. Well, my dears, thank you. Change in leadership is one of the acid tests of the sustainability of any arts organization. But I feel that we have done it right in this long planned for succession. With that, I'm delighted to introduce you to the next artistic director of the Arts Café, the poet Lisa Starr. Won't you please come up here, Lisa?
I just want to thank all of you, Christy, of course, and Melanie, the grandmother of the Arts Cafe. So it's an honor, and I even bought new shoes because I know I'm stepping into something really big. So I looked all over Athens, Georgia for these shoes, and I know they can see us through the transition. And I'm so honored to be able to transition with the two of you tonight. What an honor. So let's turn it over to Marilyn.
Ain't we got class? It's good luck to introduce Marilyn Nelson, who is one of the most important voices of her generation. She is surely one of the most honored of American poets. In addition to the aforementioned Ruth Lilly Prize, she has 3 times won a finalist medal for the National Book Award and has also won the Poets Prize, the Lenore Marshall Poetry Prize, the Frost Medals, among many others. She's also the Emerita State Poet Laureate of Connecticut. Unique among contemporary poets, she's also dedicated herself to writing poems for young readers, and indeed has been equally honored as the author of books for young readers, which have won, among many prizes, the Neustadt Prize. You don't get any bigger than that. The Newbery Honor Book, the Boston Globe Horn Book Award, the Coretta Scott King Honor Book Award twice, and the Unicorn Award for Excellence in American Poetry. And believe me, I could go on in this vein. But putting prizes and honors aside, it's the poems that matter. And Marilyn Nelson's poems matter because she consistently, bravely, intelligently takes on the big themes of our country, of history, family, faith, and race. As you will hear, Marilyn Nelson's poetic voice sings in many keys. She is sometimes a poet of comfort and prayer, sometimes a poet of remembrance, sometimes a poet of outrage at life's hardness, sometimes a poet of gutsy, joyful, and cleansing laughter. Oh, what a gladdening sense of humor. Throughout Ms. Nelson's work, there is also a resonant and persuasive tension between the spiritual and the worldly. This is a poet solidly anchored in the real world, even as her voice yearns for and imagines the realm of the spirit. And from this tension emerges her deeply earned wisdom. It is good health to read and hear the poems of Marilyn Nelson. It is also often fun. But won't you please judge for yourself as you join with me in welcoming Marilyn Nelson.
I'm so pleased, can you hear me? So pleased to be reading here again.
I have to thank Christy, Melanie, now Lisa, and all of you. It's been great to be peripherally connected to such a great organization and venue. I'm going to set a timer. So, I thought I would start by reading a couple of brand new things. I don't write a lot, and these are the first things I've written in quite a while. I've been writing these little tiny thoughts. I don't even know if they're poems. I read a couple of weeks ago, as part of a science and poetry program sponsored by Maria Popova, who does brain pickings, and sitting there listening to all these astrophysicists read poems made me think things that my brain couldn't really get around. Ackle Island. Yeah, okay. That my brain couldn't really get around, and this first little poem is a response to that evening. It's called Molecule Song. What if each molecule has its song, unique from spark back into darkness? And what we think makes us important is just an infinitesimal grace note in the music of wonder. So I've got about 3 of these. This is something I wrote after learning that I had won this big prize. I was thinking of Emily Dickinson's poem, I'm Nobody, Who Are You? And the idea of being a big frog in the pond who has to spend all of his time calling out his own name to the bog. Excuse me, to the admiring bog, she says. Excuse me, this is called Tadpole. Like a tadpole growing legs in a bog of burps and cheeps, one hopes to be a diva. One hopes to be a cantor. Thanks, I've got some things. This is from the news, torn from the news. It's called Illegal Toddler, and it has an epigraph which was the beginning of a news piece. Illegal toddler dies shortly after release from an ICE detention center. Illegal toddler, where is your mommy? Where is your daddy? Who carried you through desert or swamp, coyotes or bloodhounds snarling, nipping their heels? Where are the parents who, believing what they could not understand, X'd you to heavy, droopy drawers in a comfortless room full of coughing and snot, to a brief, cold, lonely, uncomprehending, me stinky, illegal life? And this is the last just slice of life. It's called Running the Water Hard So It Gets Hot. Running the water hard so it gets hot. Which of us gonna give up running water so some third world children can play soccer? Out of their world on TV past midnight, they gaze directly with accusing eyes. Not accusing exactly, not pleading. Pause a second for an adjective break. searching, searching. Not any word I can think of except searching, searching, brown. I think I set this. Did I turn it on? Yes, I did. It's happened that I've forgotten to do that. I'm going to read a couple of from a couple of projects about villages, American villages. The first, I read a few poems from a little book called The Meeting House, which is based on the it's based on the first 200 years of a 350-year-old church, the First Congregational Church of Old Lyme. It celebrated its 350th in 2016, and the minister asked me to write some poems about the history of the church. So these poems are taken from a published history of the church, and then I also worked with a local historian who was writing a prose, in more detailed, a prose book about the history of the church. So I'm going to read, I think, about, 8 poems, if I can fit them in. This is the title poem, The Meeting House, dated 1666. These are sounds the landscape has never heard, a strange human language, axes and saws, iron hammers pounding home iron nails, the tromp of boots, the cough of musket fire. Sighing, the old-growth trees crash to the ground, opening a blue vista. Distant sails scud on the wind, silent as butterflies. Englishmen are building a meeting house, a container for worship, a refuge from the new world of heathen savages. Called by the Sabbath drummer at the door, men in black breeches, fitted coats, white stockings and white collars, and women in long, sad-colored dresses and bonnets arrive by horseback or on foot. Armed guards nod welcome. Through the greased paper windows comes light never before caught in plank walls. They sit divided by the center aisle, the left side men, the right women and girls, boys in the back with the servants and slaves. This is, you all know Griswolds. This is a poem about 2 generations of Griswolds, Matthew Griswold Jr. and Matthew Griswold III. The date is 1712. The poem is called 5 Years Before the Mast, and it's the adventure of Matthew Griswold III. Every family has its prodigal, though some rebel more subtly than others. Matty defied his father and escaped by sneaking out one night to go to sea. It was the beginning of many prayers raised by Reverend Noyes and the congregation, as the resentful silence grew and grew between Matthew Jr. and Matthew III, the respected father and his wayward son. Meanwhile, Matty signed on a merchantman bound for Jamaica, full to the gunwales with a cargo of lumber and salt cod, and had barely begun to learn the ropes when a nor'easter made him value life. Landed in Kingston, he'd scarcely swallowed a well-deserved celebratory grog when he was drafted by two men with knives to swab the decks of a man-of-war. Released after months with empty pockets, he joined the crew of a northbound frigate, only later noticing its black flag. He learned that you can't hide in the crow's nest when the enemy unleashes its guns, and that blood on wet decks is slippery. When the privateer's captain surrendered, Matty was held on a Spanish galleon, rattling leg chains, famished, thirsty, and sick. The Spanish captain offered him freedom if he'd be baptized in the one true church. He declined, trusting in God's providence, and solemnly resolved to reform his life should grace return him to his father's house. When skinny, hollow-eyed, bearded, shaggy, Matty appeared in Lyme, the church bell rang in jubilation. Matty's penitence lasted 8 weeks. Then the sea called again. I must say I liked Matty. This is called X Her Mark, based on a notation in the church history. Consent to sail, signed by Temperance Mulatto, half Mohegan, Negro girl, January 13th, 1726. She signed consent to be sold into slavery. X Her Mark. What in the movings overhead at night, in the circle of the four directions, in the bedrock sequence of the seasons, made our togethering come to exist? In whose dream was this partnership first real? Might I have lived and died without knowing the understanding gaze of acceptance, the handshake pledging our resignation? We might still be in the tribes of our births, each of us longing up into starlight for the other everyone hopes to find. What if our mothers had not been captives? What if our fathers had not been enslaved? What if they had died in the Middle Passage? What if white men hadn't found Africa or stolen this land where our eyes have met? You might be planting fields beyond the sea. I might not have seen your shy white teeth smile. Now this white man says he binds my future and that of my children and grandchildren for our natural lives. I must marry you, and with you must bear children he will own. Oxford, he says, this girl shall be thy wife. I look into your eyes. I make my mark. Thank you. I think I'll just read maybe a couple more from this book. This is the partner of that one. It's called Slave Marriage. It's in the voice of Oxford. Again, this is in the church record. Slave marriage. I do not take this woman to be my wife, to have and to hold, but I do accept with gratitude this gift of a helpmeet, bedmate, and sharer of secret despair. How should I call an owned woman my wife, knowing my children born to her are his? In sickness and health, richer or poorer, when he whistles, she must run like a dog. But I will take her to the airless room in the attic where I sleep, and our breath will whiten the air over my palate until we jump to work in the pre-dawn. I will hold her warm sobbing in my arms, touch her with tenderness work makes wooden. I will hear Africa's drums in her heart, and with her build an African future. Loneliness is an anvil in the chest, adding to the tonnage of helplessness. But the lone cat in a family household discovers it is a cat when a new cat comes. So I say, yes, let him make you my wife. No longer alone, I shall be a we. No longer alone, I shall be a we. Shoulder to shoulder, we shall face down fate, blessed and cursed by the trickster ancestors. Sorry. Let me see. I said I would read a couple more. On April 10th, 1776, George Washington passed through Lyme with the Continental Army. And this is a description of that event. Forgive me if I cough. I'm sorry. Yeah, I've got water. Oh, okay. Just drink water and not read poems. As I lifted the kettle from the hob, I heard the sound of drums from far away. I paused a moment. Then that hot water got heavy, but I listened while I worked. A steady rhythm, now and then a fife. I washed, wiped, and put the dishes away, then dried my hands and hung up the dish rag. Now I heard hoofbeats and many men's boots. I took my shawl and stepped into the dusk. Out front, a white man with golden shoulders and a sandy pigtail sat a gray horse as if they were one being longing to prance. Most of the town was lined along the street, clapping and cheering. A white army marched, black-booted feet in perfect unison, toward the church, in identical cocked hats, white sashes, blue coats with silver buttons, fawn waistcoats and breeches, and knee-high boots. They carried muskets fitted with bayonets. Never had I seen such terrible power. They marched to the cadence the drummer set, left, right, left, right, left, right, for many ranks. Some of us gathered behind McCurdy's house whispering what we had heard and understood of all this commotion. Zacchaeus swore he saw some brothers among the soldiers. The drummer they marched to brought up the rear. We stood silenced when we saw his dark face. Let's see, I'll read one more from this, and let me just decide which one it should be. Maybe I'll read two more, if I can. Let's see. Sorry, I've lost the timer. Okay. This is in 1817. There was a crazy busy temperance movement all over New England. 1817, and in the little church records, there's a little note saying, Nancy, Negro servant of Mrs. Mary Ann Noyes, excommunicated for drunkenness. First Congregational Church, Lyme, Connecticut, 1817. This is called the temperance flu. It seemed like everybody got the temperance flu. It's an epidemic passing from house to house among the white peoples and some of us. That Reverend Rockwell say drink is evil, and now they done started a society for the promotion of temperance, and they want everybody in town to resolve to abstain entirely from spirituous liquors. Reverend Rockwell, he say, I'm on the road to hell, ungodly, unhumbled, and incorrigible, whatever the hell that means. And what the hell, don't he know I was born and raised in hell? Excommunicate me from their church? Don't make me laugh. I never had a place at that table. My God and me got an understanding. He keep me supplied with ardent spirit. I praise him, fingers crossed behind my back. Thanks. Okay, this is the last one I'll read from the meeting house. It's called Camp Meeting. It's the Second Great Awakening in the middle of the 19th century. This is 1827. The names are from the church history. The incident, or just a description of a revival meeting in Old Saybrook in April 1827. I fell in love with the names. Camp Meeting. Wealthy Anne, Ruhama, Ophelia, Harriet, Hipsy, and I took the ferry to the big camp meeting in Old Saybrook, where 10 famous preachers took turns exhorting us to find Jesus and to serve him by serving each other. The crowd swarmed like ants taking breadcrumbs home. Wealthy Anne said smelling all those people made her dizzy. But Ruhama and I suggested her corset was laced too tight. I didn't count the big tents they'd set up, but walking between them, you could hear shrieks pleading for mercy and offering thanks, and people clapping their hands and singing, preachers asking if you're washed in his blood and telling you we must free the captives and feed the hungry and proclaim good news. You'd glimpse people with their hands in the air or swaying side by side, almost dancing. People more like us and common people. Sea captains' wives and freedmen surrendered to the ecstatic profession of faith. We bought squares of delicious corn cake from a baker with a basket of them, who blessed us as we pressed coins into her palm. And that handsome Oliver Ingram, he's in his last year at Yale, smiled at me. Oh, it was thrilling. but we had to leave early to catch the ferry back to Lyme. Wealthy Anne, Ophelia, and Harriet giggled almost the whole way to the dock. Hipsy was pensive, and I couldn't stop longing to love my neighbor as myself. So that's Lyme, Connecticut, and I moved to a different village now. Come on. Enter passcode. Okay. About to run out of time. This is about Seneca Village, which was founded in 1825 in Manhattan when a white farmer, for some reason nobody knows, decided to sell part of his land to African Americans who were free. We think we know that the people who bought this land bought because in order to vote, you had to own land. So that seems to have been the motivation. But in any case, from 1825 to about 1842, this was an African American village in Manhattan. There's a little plaque now in Central Park, about Central Park West and 86th Street. The village was destroyed when the city decided to build Central Park. So it used the power of eminent domain, we know about that, to force the residents to sell their property. So it's from 1825 to about 1840 something. It was a black village. And then during the Great Hunger in Ireland, there were a lot of Irish refugees who arrived in North America, and a large group of them arrived in Seneca and settled there, and it became an integrated village. And I have in mind reading a few Seneca Village poems. Let me see, I've got 9 minutes. I'm going to turn this, maybe I'll turn it off so it doesn't ring. Huh. Okay. This is called Landowner. I used names of residents of Seneca Village that were in the census records. They're identified by name, age, and occupation, and their address. So I used these names and occupations and ages to create puppets to illustrate what was going on in the local history and national history during the time. So each of them is identified with a speaker. This is called Landowner. Its speaker is Andrew Williams, who was a bootblack in 1825. There ain't nothing shameful about good, honest work. It's a proud man that comes home with a decent wage. I keep my head down. I listen when rich folks talk. The finer the leather, the wiser the financial sage. 1 foot on my box, Mr. Man stands tapping the news on his knee, talking shop confidentially with a friend. I wipe off the filth, then with a clean rag, smooth his boot with lamp black, beeswax, and lanolin. I deal merchandise shipped in on the Erie Canal. Buy low, sell high. Then buy land for the right to vote. You massage through his boot, caress his toes, his heel, If you're lucky, he'll say what's coming on tomorrow's boat. Thanks to dropped tips, I'm a bootblack with his own place. I may bow at their knees, shushing with the horsehair brush, but I buff with spit on a rag to a mirrored face aflame with pride, blazing like a burning bush. This is, again, early in the history of the village. It's called 15-cent futures. One of the names I found was Epiphany Davis. And I thought, well, I think let's make him a conjure man, just to fit the name. So he's a conjure man and appears several times here. 15-cent futures. I set up my cash box and my bones and cards on Broadway most days, offering what I see of what's to come. For a donation, words fall from my mouth, surprising even me. Uncle Epiphany doesn't forecast death or illness worse than gout or a broken bone. The sailors stop. They listen with caught breath as I tell them some girl's heart is still theirs alone. Or not. Young love is such a butterfly. Girls come, arms linked, giggling behind their fans. The sad come. Uncle Epiphany doesn't lie. I close shop and come back up here to my land. It's a new world up here of beggar millionaires. Neighbors who know how we all scrimped and saved to own this stony swamp with its fetid air, to claim the dream for dreamers yet enslaved. I'm Epiphany Davis. I am a conjure man. I see glimpses, glass towers, a horseless vehicle, an American president who is half African. Until you pay me, that's all I'm going to tell. Let's see, I read a couple more and then come to an end. Pardon? Oh, that was 9 minutes ago when I stopped the clock. Let's see. This is, interestingly, in New York, and I think also in Connecticut, there was a law instituting what was called gradual emancipation. People weren't just freed from slavery like that. They were freed, but then they had to work as indentured servants for several years before they were literally freed. And that's what this poem is about. It's called Gradual Emancipation. It's dated 1827. And yeah, I think there's nothing else I have to say about it. The speaker is Angelina Riddles. She has a son whose name is Freddie, who's going to school. So he's the first person in the family to get some education. Sometimes my Freddie comes home in such a fever, it's all we can do to get him to settle down for lessons. He's so head up with whatever new thought has fallen on his fertile ground. By state law, born free, but by law indentured to be legally freed only at 21, I grew gradually free. But I remained unlettered until I became the student of my son. I'm becoming quite the lady. I can write A, which is what my name begins with. Ignorance may be a shackle, but I'm freer every day, and wiser, if such a word can describe a dunce. For most of my 29 years, I've been free but not free. This is a contradiction, I now know, but it's universal, metaphorically. I suddenly understand with an O of awe. Let's see, I think maybe I'll read the last poem instead of prolonging this, because I'm sure I've gone over my 9 minutes. This is another poem about where we are in the world. I'm sorry, I'm not sorry. I love this poem. It's called Aleppo Boy. Aleppo Boy. Sometimes it seems to me that we who think the earth belongs to us are a disease spreading like gangrene up a dying limb, that no one but ourselves can amputate ourselves, our wild-firing metastasis. Sometimes I think we speak a cave language, thumping our chests and clubbing each other. I think we believe the purpose of life is to accumulate an Alps of wealth we can hunker on, snarling at beggars. Sometimes I overhear such nastiness, I want to wash my ears out with cold soap. Sometimes, seeing how we hate each other, I also see how much we hate ourselves, how we blame ourselves for our unbeauty. Sometimes I'm sick of being human. I think I'd like to be a hummingbird, a monarch butterfly, a polar bear. That bliss, each atom's migratory urge, awakening with cubs from a cold sleep. Or it might be nice to murmur among sisters, lovingly watching elephant babies, casting side-eye on the acting out teens. All the alternatives are dying out. Their future, the thinnest pie slice of life. The animals whose brains are most like ours, chimpanzees, pigs, bottlenose dolphins, whales. Would we heed them if we understood their languages of signs, chirps, songs, and scream? Would they tell us we are fouling the nest? Oh, humans of the whole spectrum of skins, perhaps there's still something left we can do, some salving bequest we can leave behind. We could catch the deep blues of the ocean. We could hold joys breaching into sunlight. Sing the sea-born scent of frangipani, the delicate wing beats of fairy terns, the maracas of a thousand-fold school of shrimp. Let's write the poetry of the great whales, the poetry of one whale who is dying? Do the great whales have names they call themselves? Does each feel as unique as Moby Dick? Are some whale songs poems about being calves? Are some whale songs poems about whale mothers? Do creatures with brains like ours have interior lives? What we can do is bring the inner out. Only we capture time in poetry. Thin arms circle my neck. A small torso heaves against mine. My ear is deafened by sobs. I rock, I pat. Poor world, I say. There, there. Thank you. Thank you.
Marilyn Nelson, ladies and gentlemen. I know you all join me in thanking Marilyn. What a beautiful reading. Right here in Funny Little Mystic, let me also thank Nora Fox and Zhu Young Lee again, and Sean Frederick Forbes. What a night. I promised Nora Fox that I would announce that she has a mailing list over on our book table that she invites you to add your name to if you would like to hear about future concerts she's doing in the area. We have some of Marilyn Nelson's books on sale tonight. Actually, we have many of them. When she said she hardly writes, this is... You will see we got a lot of books on the table over there. So I'm sure she'd be glad to sign them for you. Wonderful books, books that will change your life, enlarge your life. I urge you to buy one. Thank you so much. The Arts Café will return in September. We hope you will too. Good night.